The air in the great hall was thick with tension, yet something had changed. Vasha, once feared as the tyrant of Zorth, now spoke with a new voice, one of strength mixed with care. The people noticed, the generals noticed, even the merchants whispered about a leader who was different. For decades, the Dominion had been ruled by fear. Laws were harsh, punishment swift. Many worlds lived under strict control, their people longing for freedom. But Vasha was beginning to break that pattern. Rian watched her closely. After months together, he had seen the cracks in her armor, the moments when her iron will soften just enough to let hope in. The upcoming birth of their heir was changing her in ways no war or threat ever could. In a private meeting, Vasha unfolded new plans before the council. We will reduce the military presence on peaceful worlds. Trade and cooperation must replace fear. Our empire will be stronger for it. Some generals grumbled. This invites rebellion, one warned. Or loyalty, Vasha replied firmly. We must trust our people if we wish to keep them. Rhea nodded beside her, adding, a kingdom ruled by respect lasts longer than one ruled by force. The changes were not easy. Old enemies still whispered in dark corners. Some leaders resisted the shift, fearing loss of power. But Vasha faced them all, her resolve shining brighter than ever. One evening, as Rian and Vasha walked through the palace gardens, a sudden alarm shattered the calm. Palace guards rushed past, weapons drawn. There's an attempt on your life, a guard said urgently. Vasha's eyes narrowed. Take me to the source. Rian followed closely as they moved quickly through hidden passages, reaching a room where an attacker was caught trying to sabotage the palace defenses. The man was desperate, his eyes wild with fear. The Empire must not change, he hissed. Vasha looked at him steadily. Change is coming. Whether you fight it or not, the assassination attempt shocked the court. But it also strengthened Vasha's supporters. Many saw the attack as proof that her reforms were necessary and that the future belonged to those who embraced unity. Rian helped coordinate new security measures, using his knowledge of both human and Zorth tactics to protect the leader and the palace. As days passed, Vasha grew bolder, visiting markets and speaking directly to citizens, a practice unheard of for a ruler of the Dominion. The birth of the heir came quietly, but it changed everything. The child was healthy, with bright eyes that held the promise of both worlds. Vasha held the baby close, her fierce exterior softened by a mother's love. This child is more than a symbol, she said to Rian. They are the hope for a new era. Rian smiled. A bridge between two peoples. News of the heir spread through the galaxy, bringing a cautious optimism. Allies came forward, and even some former enemies paused to reconsider. Vasha continued to work tirelessly, pushing reforms and building alliances. She was no longer the feared tyrant. She was a guardian, one who protected not through fear, but through strength and hope. Rian and Vasha stood together on the palace balcony one evening, looking out over the stars. The road ahead is long, Vasha said softly. But it's the right road, Rian replied. Together, they faced a future where peace was possible, and for the first time, the galaxy believed it might last. The galaxy had seen too much war for 10 long years. The Vurakesh Empire and the Human Federation fought in the cold darkness between the stars. Countless ships were destroyed, and whole planets suffered. Yet in the end, both sides realized no one would truly win. So, an unusual idea came, an ancient Vurakesh custom. A marriage between two rulers could unite nations stronger than any treaty. The Vurakesh Council suggested that their queen, Thaura, marry a respected human figure to seal the peace forever. When the queen agreed, many expected the human leader to send one of Earth's greatest warriors. Instead, the man who stepped forward was quiet and calm, a diplomat named Rian. On the day of the wedding, the grand palace of Vurakesh shone like a jewel in the sunlight of their twin suns. Tall crystal towers reflected light across the capital city. Inside, alien nobles in fine robes whispered among themselves, their dark eyes following every move of the human. Standing at the queen's side, Rian wore simple silver ceremonial armor, given to him by the queen. He bowed respectfully during every part of the ceremony, speaking only when tradition required. His voice was steady, polite, and without pride. To the nobles, he seemed unimpressive. They expected broad shoulders, heavy weapons, and loud declarations of power, qualities the Viewership respected in their leaders. But this human was slim, reserved, and never spoke of his victories. One noble leaned toward another and muttered, "This is the great human they send? He looks more like a scribe than a warrior." The other chuckled quietly. Perhaps humans have no real champions after all. Rian heard the whispers but did not react. His eyes remained calm, watching the queen as she spoke her vows in the deep, musical language of her people. Queen Thora herself had mixed thoughts. She had agreed to this marriage to protect her people, but she also feared it would make her look weak in the eyes of her empire. Still, there was something unusual about the human beside her. His posture was perfect, his breathing even, and, though he stood still, she sensed he was aware of everything happening around him. When the final vows were spoken and the bond was sealed, the crowd applauded with formal respect. The queen turned to her new husband and saw the faintest trace of a smile on his face. Not a smile of victory, but one of quiet understanding. The first weeks of their union were filled with ceremonies and diplomatic duties. Rian followed the queen through the halls of the Crystal Palace, meeting alien lords, signing trade agreements, and learning the customs of the Viewership. He adapted quickly. Where other humans might have stumbled over alien greetings, Rian memorized every phrase and gesture in days. He never raised his voice, never made mistakes in public. But he never spoke much about himself either. The queen's personal guard began to watch him closely, curious about this silent husband. Captain Vorik, a tall warrior with scars along his jaw, once tried to challenge Rian in the training yard. "You are the queen's chosen," Vorik said with a grin. "Let us see if you can hold a blade like a real warrior." Rian simply shook his head. "I'm here to keep the peace, Captain. My fighting days are over." The other guards laughed and walked away, convinced the human could not fight at all. Yet, there were moments when the queen noticed something different. Once, during a royal dinner, a servant tripped while carrying a tray of crystal dishes. Before anyone could react, Rian caught the entire tray without spilling a drop. He placed it back in the servant's hands with a polite nod and returned to his seat. As if nothing had happened, another time, as they walked through the city, a large hovercart lost control and rushed toward a group of children. Rian stepped forward, moving faster than the queen thought possible, pulling the children to safety before the cart slammed into a wall. When she questioned him about it, he only replied, "It was simply the right thing to do." The queen began to wonder, who exactly was this man? She asked him one night in the private garden, under the glow of the twin moons. "You move as though danger is always near, yet you say you are only a diplomat. Why is that?" Rian looked at the moonlight on the fountain before answering. "In my life, I have seen enough danger to last many lifetimes. I have learned that peace is precious and fragile. If I can protect it quietly, I will." He said nothing more, and she did not press him. Outside the palace walls, not everyone celebrated the marriage. Some alien warlords saw it as a sign the queen had grown soft. Whispers of rebellion spread in the outer systems. In the dark halls of a distant fortress, shadowed figures spoke of striking soon, removing the queen before the humans could gain too much influence in the empire. One of them, a scarred alien general, slammed his clawed hand on the table. "The human will be the easiest part to remove. He is no fighter. We strike at the festival of peace, when the palace is open to all. She will not see it coming." Back in the capital, preparations for the festival began. The queen looked forward to showing the people that humans and Viewership could stand together in unity. But Rian felt uneasy. As the days passed, he noticed unusual activity, new faces in the markets, strangers near the palace gates, quiet signals exchanged between guests. In the training yard, he asked Captain Vorik about the old service tunnels beneath the palace. "Do they still connect to the city's outer walls?" Vorik frowned. "Why would you ask about those? They have been sealed for years." Rian only nodded, saying nothing more. But that night, he studied a star map of the palace grounds, marking certain points in his mind. The queen noticed his distant expression during a council meeting. Is something troubling you, Rian? She asked afterward. He met her gaze calmly. Some threats speak louder than words, Thaura. I only hope I'm wrong. The queen did not understand his full meaning, but something in his voice made her uneasy. In the shadows of the palace, silent watchers prepared for their moment. The festival was only 3 days away, and the humans' quiet strength was about to be tested, in a way no one expected. The palace of Viewership was like a living jewel. Its tall crystal walls caught the light of the twin suns and painted colors across the floors. From morning until night, the halls were busy with servants, guards, and noble guests. Every step Rian took was watched by many eyes. Some nobles still doubted him. To them, he was only a symbolic husband, a human placed beside the queen for peace's sake. They believed he had no real power, and in truth, Rian gave them no reason to think otherwise. He attended every meeting, bowed at every ceremony, and spoke only when asked. His voice was calm, never sharp, and his words always polite. He did not argue with anyone. He did not show anger. Yet, while the court saw a quiet man, Rian's mind was always moving, every day. He walked with the queen to learn her duties. She introduced him to the trade ministers, the starship engineers, and the healers of the royal infirmary. He listened carefully, memorizing names and roles. He watched how the nobles interacted, which ones were loyal and which ones seemed to hide something. He noticed small details: a guard who never looked directly at the queen, a servant who left too quickly when certain guests arrived, a noble whose smile never reached his eyes. The queen also saw how well he adapted. When she took him to the market district of the capital, he spoke to merchants in the Viewership tongue, using perfect pronunciation. The merchants were surprised and pleased, offering him small gifts of fruit and woven cloth. You learn quickly, Queen Thaura told him as they returned to the palace. Rian simply replied, "It is easier to walk in a place if you understand the path," but not all encounters were so friendly. One afternoon, during a weapons display in the palace courtyard, Captain Vork approached Rian again. The tall alien carried a long crystal spear and wore the armor of the royal guard. "The queen's husband should know the ways of our people," Vork said loudly, so others would hear. "I challenge you to a friendly test, spear against spear. Show us your skill." The watching nobles smiled, expecting an amusing sight. Rian looked at the spear offered to him. "Captain, my place here is as a diplomat, not a fighter. My hands are for peace now." Vork laughed. "Then you admit you cannot fight." "I admit nothing," Rian said, handing the spear back without anger. "But I will not raise a weapon unless I must." Some nobles laughed at his refusal, calling it weakness. Vork shook his head and walked away. The queen, however, studied Rian in silence. He had not looked afraid, only certain of his choice. Days passed, and the palace prepared for the grand festival of peace. Workers decorated the streets with banners of blue and gold. Musicians rehearsed in the courtyards. Dancers practiced. Under the twin suns, their movements graceful and precise. It was to be the first festival since the war ended, and the queen wanted it to be perfect. She believed that showing joy and unity would strengthen the bond between humans and Viewership. Rian helped with the arrangements, meeting with guests from distant planets and guiding human visitors through the city. But all the while, he noticed small signs that troubled him. One evening, he was walking along the palace's southern wall when he saw two workers carrying large crates into a storage room. Nothing seemed strange at first, but the workers did not wear the normal palace uniforms. Their steps were too careful, too deliberate. When Rian returned to that spot later, the crates were gone. Another time, he overheard a quiet conversation in a corner of the gardens. Two figures in dark cloaks spoke in a low voice, one saying, "The night of the festival, everything will be ready." When they noticed him approaching, they quickly bowed and left. That night, in their private chambers, Rian sat with the queen. At the long balcony overlooking the city, lanterns glowed in the streets below as the citizens prepared for the festival. "You seem far away in thought," the queen said, sipping from a crystal cup. "I am thinking about the old service tunnels." Rian replied. Do they still run beneath the palace? She looked at him in surprise. Why ask about those? They have been sealed for decades. My great-grandfather ordered it. Rian nodded slowly. And yet, if someone wished to enter unseen, those tunnels might be useful. Even a sealed door can be opened with the right tools. The queen frowned. Do you believe there is a danger? I hope I am wrong, Rian said simply. But danger often hides behind celebration. Over the next 2 days, his unease grew. He began walking the palace at night, memorizing every hallway and guard post. He greeted the guards politely, but paid close attention to how quickly they responded to unexpected movement. He also started speaking quietly to a few human visitors, old friends from the diplomatic ship that had brought him to Vurakesh. He asked them to keep their eyes open during the festival and to signal him if anything unusual happened. On the last day before the celebration, the queen held a private meeting with her council. The ministers spoke of trade deals, security patrols, and the order of events for the festival. When Rian mentioned increasing the number of guards at the south wall, one minister raised an eyebrow. Why? There has been no trouble there for years. Because it is the quiet places that trouble prefers, Rian answered. Some of the council members exchanged amused glances, thinking him overly cautious. The queen, however, ordered the additional guards without question. That night, the city was silent under the twin moons. Rian stood at the balcony once more, looking down at the streets, somewhere out there, among the musicians and merchants, preparing for tomorrow's joy. He knew danger waited in the shadows beyond the outer gates. Figures in dark cloaks gathered around a small campfire. One of them unrolled a rough map of the palace. The leader's voice was low but firm. At the third song of the festival, we move. The queen will be surrounded by her people. The human will be close, but he will not stop us. Another figure asked, and if he tries? The leader smiled faintly. Then he will learn what happens to those who stand in our way, far above, in the palace. Rian closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. The air was still, but he could feel the storm coming. Tomorrow, the festival of peace would begin, and perhaps it would also become a test of whether peace could survive at all. The day of the festival of peace began with bright sunlight, spilling over the crystal towers of the capital. The air was warm, filled with the scent of flowers brought from every corner of the Vurakesh Empire. Musicians in bright robes walked the streets, testing their instruments, while children laughed and ran through the plazas. The palace was alive with movement. Servants hurried with trays of fruit and golden cups of sweet drink. Guards stood at attention in polished armor, their spears catching the light. Banners of blue and gold hung from the high balconies. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But Rian knew danger often hid behind beauty. He woke early, long before the official ceremonies began, standing at the high window of the guest wing. He scanned the city below. His eyes moved from the crowded market squares to the narrow side streets, searching for anything unusual. Captain Vork entered the room in full armor. The guards are ready. Human, the queen will walk through the festival route as planned. Rian turned from the window. In the southern wall, more guards posted. As you asked, Vork said with a small nod. Though I still think you worry for nothing. This is a day for joy, not suspicion. Joy can be the perfect cover for danger, Rian replied quietly. The queen joined them soon after, dressed in a flowing robe of deep silver that shimmered when she moved. You seem troubled again, she said. Noticing his serious face, Rian offered a polite bow. I would rather be overcautious than regretful, Valra. She studied him for a moment but did not argue. Instead, she offered her arm. Then walk with me today, and we shall see if your caution is needed. The festival began with the queen's arrival in the main plaza. Crowds filled the space, cheering and waving flags. Musicians played a deep, rhythmic tune as dancers moved in a wide circle around the raised stage. Rian stayed close to the queen, his eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. Many were smiling, but not all. In the far corner, he spotted a tall figure in a hood who did not clap or cheer. The man's head was slightly tilted, As if listening to something in the distance, Rion's mind marked the position immediately. As the first performance ended, the Queen stepped forward to speak. Today, we celebrate not only the end of war, but the beginning of unity, she said, her voice carrying across the plaza. Human and Viewership stand together as one, stronger than before, wiser than before. The crowd roared with approval, but Rion noticed movement along the edge of the plaza, 3 figures slipping away toward the narrow alleys. They moved with the smooth confidence of trained fighters. He leaned slightly toward Vork. Send to guards to follow those men, quietly. Vork raised an eyebrow but obeyed, signaling to warriors with a subtle gesture. The second part of the festival took place in the palace gardens, where guests could walk among fountains and rare flowers while musicians played soft melodies. Rion walked a step behind the Queen, greeting nobles and merchants from across the empire. He kept his voice friendly, but his eyes never stopped searching. Near the fountain of white crystal, he saw another strange sight: a servant carrying a large vase toward the main stage. Nothing unusual about that, except the servant's hands were gloved. Palace servants almost never wore gloves in the warm season. Rion stepped in front of him. I will take that, he said calmly. The servant froze for a moment before bowing and handing over the vase. Inside were flowers and something else hidden among the stems. Rion caught the faint glint of metal. He nodded to Vork, who took the vase and carried it away without a word. The false servant slipped into the crowd, disappearing before Rion could follow. By mid-afternoon, the festival reached its most crowded moment. Thousands of people filled the streets between the palace and the plaza. The Queen was to lead a short parade through the city, ending at the grand hall for the evening feast. Rion felt the pressure in the air. It was not something the average person would notice, but he had felt it many times before: silent tension before violence. As the Queen stepped into the parade path, Rion's gaze swept over the rooftops. For a heartbeat, he saw a faint flash of light in a high window across the street, sunlight on metal. He moved instantly, placing himself between the Queen and the window. Shields up, he barked to the nearest guards. The guards reacted, raising their crystal shields just as a loud crack echoed. Something struck the shield, shattering it into pieces. Gasps spread through the crowd. Panic began to ripple outward, but Rion's voice cut through the noise. Form a circle. Protect the Queen. The guards closed in, spears ready. Rion's eyes scanned the buildings, marking escape routes. He saw figures moving along the rooftops, more than one. They're testing us, he said to Vork. The real strike hasn't come yet, Vork growled. Then let's end this before it begins. Not yet, Rion replied. If we move too soon, we'll lose them. Let them think we're blind a little longer. The parade continued under heavier guard, but Rion felt no relief. Every corner, every shadow seemed to hold a threat. He noted a group of musicians who joined from a side street. They played the right tune, but their steps were too heavy for dancers. When the group reached the next plaza, Rion gave a subtle signal. Two human diplomats in the crowd stepped forward, quietly intercepting the musicians and steering them toward a guard checkpoint. From the corner of his eye, Rion saw the Queen watching him. She said nothing, but he could feel her curiosity growing. By the time they reached the grand hall, the sun was setting, casting long golden light across the city. The Queen greeted her guests, and the music grew softer for the evening feast. Yet Rion's mind was sharper than ever. He could almost feel the clock ticking down toward the moment when the hidden enemy would strike. In the high balcony above the hall, a shadow moved slow, deliberate, Rion's gaze fixed on it. His heartbeat steady. He stepped closer to the Queen and spoke just loud enough for her to hear. When it comes, do not hesitate, stay low, and follow my lead. The Queen turned her head slightly, confusion in her eyes. When what comes? Rion's gaze did not leave the balcony. The reason I am here. In the darkness above, a signal light blinked once. All across the city, other shadows began to move toward the palace. The Festival of Peace was about to change into something else entirely. Morning in the capital came with the warm glow of the twin suns. The crystal towers shone brightly, and the air was full of the scent of flowers brought from faraway worlds. People filled the streets early, hanging blue and gold banners for the Festival of Peace. The palace itself was full of movement. Servants hurried down the long marble halls, carrying trays of food and decorations. Guards stood straighter than usual, armor polished until it gleamed. From every window came the sounds of music, laughter, and preparation. To any visitor, the day looked perfect, but to Rian, something felt wrong. He woke before dawn and walked the palace corridors alone. His steps were silent, his eyes scanning every corner. From a high balcony, he watched the city below. The main streets were crowded already, but his attention went to the narrow side paths and shaded doorways. He was looking for things most people would ignore: unfamiliar faces, strange movements. Anything that didn't fit, Captain Vork found him there, dressed in full armor and carrying his long crystal spear. "The guard lines are ready," Vork said. "The queen will walk the festival route as tradition demands." Rian didn't look away from the streets and the southern wall. "More guards, as you ordered," Vork replied, though his tone carried doubt. "I still believe you are chasing shadows. Today is a day for joy, not suspicion." Rian finally turned to him. "Shadows can be dangerous if you let them grow, Captain." The queen joined them soon after, dressed in a flowing robe of silver that caught the light as she moved. "You seem tense, Rian," she said. "Surely you can relax on such a day." He gave her a small bow. "Peace is most fragile when people believe it cannot be broken. I will relax when this day is over." Fowler tilted her head, studying him, but did not press further. "Then walk beside me today and see that your fears are proven false." The festival began in the main plaza. Hundreds of Yurikesh citizens gathered, waving banners and calling out greetings to the queen. Musicians played bright, strong rhythms while dancers in bright silks spun in wide circles. Rian stayed close to the queen's right side, scanning the crowd. Most faces were smiling, but not all. Near the far edge of the plaza, he noticed a tall figure in a hood standing perfectly still, not clapping or cheering. The figure's head was tilted slightly, as if listening to something in the distance. Rian's gaze lingered on him for a heartbeat before he looked away. The queen stepped forward and spoke in her rich, clear voice. "Today is not only a celebration of the end of war, but of the strength we find in unity, Yurikesh and human side by side, unbroken." The crowd roared with approval, but Rian's attention was elsewhere. He caught sight of three men moving along the side of the plaza, slipping into an alley. Their movements were too precise to be ordinary. Leaning toward Vork, Rian spoke in a low voice. "Send to guards to follow them, quietly." Vork's jaw tightened, but he signaled to warriors without argument. The next stage of the festival took place in the palace gardens. Guests strolled along the winding paths lined with glowing flowers and gentle fountains. Rian walked beside the queen, greeting nobles and merchants. His voice was polite, his smile faint, but his eyes searched for patterns that didn't belong. Near the white crystal fountain, he spotted a servant carrying a large vase. Nothing unusual except that the man wore gloves, which was uncommon in the warm season. Rian stepped in front of him. "I'll take that," he said evenly. The servant hesitated before handing it over. Inside were flowers and something else small, metallic shapes hidden among the stems. Without a word, Rian handed the vase to Vork. The captain carried it away, and when they looked back, the servant was gone by late afternoon. The crowd in the streets was larger than ever. The queen prepared to lead a short parade from the palace to the main hall, where the evening feast would be held. As they stepped onto the parade path, Rian felt the air change. He had felt this before long ago. In war, it was the quiet weight that came before trouble. He scanned the rooftops. There a faint flash in a high window, sunlight on metal. Moving instantly, Rian stepped between the queen and the window. "Shields," he barked to the guards. A loud crack rang through the street. The nearest guard's shield shattered into crystal dust. People gasped, shouts filled the air, and panic began to spread. Rian's voice cut through the noise. "Form a circle. Protect the queen." The guards closed ranks, their crystal spears raised. Rian's eyes swept the rooftops, catching quick shadows more than one. "They're watching us," he murmured to Vork. Waiting for a better chance, Vor gritted his teeth. We should strike now. Not yet. Rian replied, if we act as soon, they will scatter and try again later. We need to see their full plan. The parade moved on, slower now, with more guards surrounding them. Rian's senses were sharp. At the next plaza, a group of musicians joined the line. They played the right notes, but their steps were too heavy and their hands too stiff for true performers. Rian gave a subtle signal to human visitors in the crowd. They approached the musicians casually, speaking a few words before guiding them toward the guard line. The queen, watching all this, said nothing, but her eyes followed him closely. When they reached the grand hall, the twin suns were low, turning the sky gold. The feast would begin soon, but Rian was far from at ease. He could almost hear an invisible clock ticking down. From the high balcony above the hall, a shadow moved, slow, careful. Rian stepped closer to the queen, his voice low. When it begins, don't hesitate. Stay low and follow my lead. The queen turned to him. When what begins? He didn't take his eyes off the balcony. The reason I am here, outside, in the deepening dusk. Cloaked figures moved through side streets toward the palace. Each carried small devices and silent weapons. The Festival of Peace had only hours left if it lasted that long. The palace was alive with whispers. Servants moved quickly through the long halls, carrying trays of food, documents, or messages. But their eyes darted nervously toward the throne room. News of the alien warlord's approach had spread. The name Corthan now echoed like thunder in every corner of the capital. Mira sat in her private chamber, the glow of the evening light falling over her silver crown. Her gaze was fixed on the city beyond the high balcony. The streets were crowded citizens looking to the palace for safety. Merchants closing their stalls early, guards rushing to reinforce the walls. Across the room, Rin was checking his armor. It was a mix of human design and alien modifications. Plates shaped for movement rather than bulk. The black metal reflected faint light. His hands moved with precision, like someone who had done this countless times before. You're calm, Mira said softly, breaking the silence. Rin looked up at her and smiled faintly. I've seen worse. She frowned. Corthan commands entire fleets. His soldiers are not simple raiders. You fought battles on your world, but I know, Rin interrupted gently. But I've fought enemies who thought they were unbeatable. Corthan will find out he's not the first. Mira studied him. For days, she had been trying to understand the depth of his confidence. It wasn't arrogance, there was something deeper, like a steady fire that would not burn out. Before she could speak again, a guard entered and bowed. Your Majesty, scouts have returned. The enemy fleet will reach our skies in 2 days. 2 days. The words struck like cold wind. Mira gave a quick order for all council members to gather. The guard bowed and left. Rin watched her. 2 days means we have enough time to prepare. If we move fast, she turned to him. You intend to lead the army. I intend to lead the fight. He corrected. But I'll need more than soldiers. I'll need the trust of your people. That evening, the council met in the great hall. The long table was surrounded by officials, nobles, military commanders, and advisors. The air was heavy with worry. Mira addressed them first. Corthan approaches. His goal is not negotiation. He wants our resources, our people, our freedom. If he wins, our world will bow to him forever. One of the nobles, a tall man with gold embroidery on his robe, leaned forward. We should evacuate the capital and preserve the royal family. Our armies cannot face Corthan's forces directly. Another commander shook his head. Running will only show weakness. But our weapons are outdated, even with our fleet. Their numbers are too great. All eyes turned when Rin stood. His voice was calm, but carried through the hall. I've fought enemies like Corthan, he began. I've seen armies twice our size fall apart when they met a force that understood their weaknesses. I will lead the defense, not from behind walls, but on the front lines. Some council members exchanged uneasy looks. One of them scoffed, You're a human outsider. You've been here for weeks, and you expect us to hand over our command. Rin met his gaze steadily. If you think I'm unproven, then watch me. I'll train your soldiers in 2 days to fight Korthan's warriors, and I'll stand in front. When the battle begins, Mira rose beside him. He is my husband. My trust in him is complete. You've all seen what he can do. Now, we must stand as one. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, they agreed. Rin would command the defense alongside the royal general. The next morning, training began. The open fields outside the capital became a storm of movement. Soldiers in bright armor practiced new formations, moving faster, reacting sharper than before. Rin walked among them, correcting their stance, demonstrating strikes, showing them how to break through heavier armor with precision rather than brute strength. Mira watched from a raised platform. She had seen her people train before, but never like this. Rin's presence was magnetic. Every soldier leaned in to listen, to learn. Even the veterans followed his orders without hesitation. At night, Rin worked with the engineers. They modified existing cannons, added new targeting systems, and set traps along the likely landing zones. Korthan will expect a straight fight, Rin explained to the chief engineer. We'll give him a war he won't see coming. On the second night, Mira found Rin standing alone at the city wall, looking at the dark horizon. She stepped beside him. You're carrying the weight of an entire world, she said quietly. He glanced at her with a faint smile. Not alone. You're here. They stood in silence for a moment, the stars above them bright and cold. Then Rin's tone shifted. When the battle starts, I need you to stay safe. If something happens to me, no, she said firmly. We fight together. I will not hide in a tower while you face Korthan. Rin looked at her, and for a moment, the warrior's mask slipped. Then promise me whatever happens you'll live, even if I don't. Mira held his gaze. We both live. That's the promise. The next morning, the sky began to change. A faint shadow spread across the horizon, growing larger. The first enemy ships appeared as dark shapes against the pale clouds. The sound of their engines reached the city like distant thunder. The people gathered on rooftops, in courtyards, on walls, watching as the invasion began. Rin stood at the front gate, his armor gleaming in the daylight. Mira stood beside him, her crown replaced with a battle helm. The soldiers were ready, their faces set with determination. The enemy fleet descended slowly, blocking the sun. Rin's voice rang out over the gathered defenders. This is our world. We don't run. We don't bow. We fight. The soldiers roared in reply, their voices shaking the air. And as the first enemy dropships broke through the clouds, the real war began. The sky above the capital was dark with enemy ships. The huge fleet of Korthan's warriors blocked out the twin suns, casting long shadows across the city. The air was thick with tension as soldiers prepared for battle. Rin stood on the front line, his black armor catching the dim light. Round him, the mixed forces of humans and Viewership waited silently, their faces a mix of fear and determination. They trusted Rin, but no one truly knew what he was capable of. The enemy warships began to land troops in the outer districts. Smoke rose quickly as their fire touched the city. Shouts rang out as soldiers rushed to hold the lines. Suddenly, a group of Viewership soldiers were surrounded near a narrow alley. Their spears were strong, but the enemy was quick and well-trained. Without hesitation, Rin sprinted forward, moving faster than most could follow. His hands worked like lightning, disarming two attackers before they could strike. He used the enemy's strength against them, twisting and throwing with perfect skill. The soldiers around him watched in amazement as he fought with calm precision, every movement controlled and powerful. After the fight, the queen rushed to his side. Rin, how did you learn to fight like that? He looked at her with tired eyes. I was once a commander in the Earth Defense Vanguard. We trained for battles far beyond your world's zero gravity, alien planets, and enemies who never stop coming. The queen's face showed surprise. Why did you hide this from us? Rin sighed. I wanted peace. I left that life behind, but I knew it might return if we were not ready. The nobles nearby whispered among themselves. Many had doubted him before, but now they saw the truth. Rin was no ordinary diplomat. He was a warrior shaped by countless battles. As the fighting grew fierce, Rin organized the defenses with skill. He moved among the soldiers, giving orders and encouragement. He taught the Viewership how to use speed and precision against heavier forces. His mixed unit of humans and aliens fought as one. They protected the city gates, pushed back enemy squads, and saved many lives. In the middle of the battle, Ren received a message from the Royal Engineers. Corthan's fleet was preparing a massive strike from the sky bombs that could destroy whole districts. Ren gathered his closest commanders. We must stop the fleet before it fires. I will lead a small team to the enemy's main ship. It will be dangerous, but it is our only chance. The Queen nodded, trusting him completely. Go with my blessing. Ren's team moved quickly. Through the chaos, they boarded a fast shuttle and flew toward the enemy fleet. The journey was tense. Enemy fighters swarmed around them, trying to block their way. Ren's knowledge of space combat showed as he skillfully dodged attacks and used the shuttle's weapons to break through. Finally, they reached the largest enemy ship, a dark fortress in space. Ren led his team through narrow corridors, avoiding patrols and traps inside the ship. They found the control room. Ren worked with the engineers to disable the weapons. Alarms blared, and enemy soldiers rushed in, but Ren's team fought bravely, holding their ground until the job was done. The fleet's massive guns went silent. Without their heavy weapons, Corthan's forces lost their advantage. Back on the city walls, the battle turned. The enemy troops grew disorganized and began to retreat. The defenders cheered, their hope renewed. The Queen stood beside Ren once more. You have saved us all. Ren shook his head. We saved ourselves together. The war was not over, but the victory showed that humans and Viewership could stand side by side. The Queen declared Ren a champion of the Empire, honoring his courage and leadership. The nobles who had once mocked the quiet human now bowed to him with respect. Ren looked at the stars above, knowing this was only the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the Empire, but for humanity among the stars.